because we're in this moment, right? We're in this extreme disruption moment. And I think one of the first things that many of us did when we had our lockdown in that first moment, is we started watching more TV. We started watching things that would take us outside of the experience of just everything else that was going on out there. And so the streaming consumption went way up because we didn't exactly know what was going to change. We just knew that we had to stay home more often than we did before. And I think we still don't really know. And I'm a big advocate of not trying to overreact. So I'm not going to tell you that this is exactly what you should do in this moment, because I don't believe that we exactly know yet. Instead, what I want to try and talk about is the method that I use to figure out what to pay attention to in the midst of all of this stuff. And I think it starts with just understanding what we need right now as people, right? As colleagues, as connections with one another, because that's what we are in this moment. And I was watching a YouTube video that I'd seen probably 2 years ago, but I was just rewatching it. And it was fascinating because I saw something that I didn't see before. And so I thought I would tell you a little bit about that. One of the things you probably know about me, if you've seen any of my talks before, is I'm a storyteller. I like to relay ideas through stories. And one of the best stories that I found recently to just help me understand what I think people need right now came from a interview around this movie. So whether you've seen the movie or not, there was an interview with one of the stars of the movie and the director of the movie, and that's who's pictured here. And they were talking about the table read for the movie. So the moment when they were trying to get the funding to do the movie. And you might have seen this video because it's kind of gone viral. And it's her doing that first song that became the hit song from the movie. It's called This Is Me. And in the lead up, she talks about how she was so nervous doing that song that she was like behind the podium. She was reading the music, and everyone was encouraging her beforehand to come outside of the podium, but she was too nervous. And you see her in that video in the whole first kind of minute and a half, she's really nervous. And you can tell that she's really nervous, but she decides to go out from behind the podium. And the whole clip is about her transformation. And what everyone talked about, and the reason why it went viral, is because she had this moment where she transformed. But to me, what was most interesting was right after she came out of that behind the podium, she turned towards the chorus, the group that was doing all of the background vocals, and there was a solo from one of the members of the chorus. And you can see her sort of indicating with her hand, like, bring the energy, like make it something huge. And that's what he does. He brings this huge amount of energy, this member of the chorus, in his solo. And he only has 4 lines. But you see that the energy in the entire room changes when he starts singing for just those few lines. And after he finishes, she turns around and she goes crazy. And everybody goes crazy. And like you see this elevation of spirit, and everything happens from that moment forwards. And I watched that during this whole lockdown and during this whole moment, and I started thinking to myself, like, that's what we're all looking for. We were looking for a person like him. We're looking for somebody who can just take it from us being a little nervous and not exactly knowing, and taking it to the next level and helping us be amazing. And I think that's a good metaphor for what we're trying to do in maybe this entire summit. We're trying to find that inspiration, because a lot of people who are in your community, in my community, they're looking at us and saying, well, what's going to happen next, right? Because we're supposed to know. And we're not predictors of the future, I believe. Any futurist is not a predictor of the future. They're an observer of what's happening right now. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what I've seen and what I believe, because I think it may help you in the work that you're doing to try and become that person for the people around you. And to me, it really comes down to understanding what's happening with people, because the people who understand people always win. They're the ones who are able to see the behavior, to see what's happening, and to be able to translate that into something that is useful, something that they're able to then translate into their business or the advice that they give, or any of the things that they're working on. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how that's changed, what's different in the world. And then I'm going to share some megatrends from my research. And the biggest question I get about that is this book that I showed you the cover of, the Non-Obvious Megatrends book. It came out in the middle of January, so a little over 2 months ago. And so obviously the first question is, well, you wrote a book about trends and now all of this happened. Is it still valid? Is it still correct, right? Or was just all of this stuff wrong? And I want to take you inside the answer to that, because I think some of the trends have really taken off and some of them have maybe taken a little bit more of a backseat. And understanding why, I think, will be useful for all of us. So let's first talk about some of the things that have changed in the world, right? There's a change in how we buy things. So how we buy or ship pretty much anything. Some of these things have been happening for some time. So we could buy a mattress, get it rolled up in this bag, get it delivered to our home. It's a totally different way for that particular industry. That's been around for a while. That's not new. All of these products that are helping us to live life more easily, right? The June Intelligent Oven, you just put the food inside, the cameras decide what the food is and they figure out how long to cook it. There's even a food sniffer device to tell you when food's gone bad, because we can't use this device that we have on our face anymore for that. We have to get an entire device to help us do that, right? This idea was ghost kitchens, which had been around for I've been reading about it for maybe 2 years. And now with the whole lockdown, it's become hugely relevant because so many more restaurants are shifting to delivery only. If they can remain open, they're shifting to delivery only, which is essentially the idea of what these ghost kitchens were. It's just a place where they cook the food, you pick it up for delivery or for takeout, and there's no restaurant to sit in because they could operate more lean in that way. In San Francisco, there was an app more than a year ago called Filled, where it allows you to summon the fuel truck to your car and it fills your car wherever it's parked. So now we're in a moment where people are afraid to go to the gas station in some cases because there's people there and you have to touch things. And now an app like this becomes even more interesting. So shifting the way that we buy things has been one of the big kind of macro shifts that's been happening. And you could argue that right now with the coronavirus, it's really started to accelerate, started to take off. The second big thing is that technology was connecting us, but it was also isolating us. And there was this whole backlash happening that's been happening for some time. Some people even called it the tech lash, right? This idea that the technology that we see around us is disconnecting us or addicting us in a way that's causing us to be removed from one another. And so you had extreme examples, like in Japan, they had this holographic wife that was a product that you could actually buy with a monthly subscription to have companionship through a digital companion. But now during the lockdown, you have all of these moments of collaboration. So here's the Now United group, which was comprised of young people from many different countries. And there was this kind of whole search. It was a reality show that found them. And once they found them, now this group's been out there and touring, and they're now doing virtual dance parties from their home because they can't get together to just keep that bonding happening. There was another product called Care Coach that was avatars, digital avatars for elderly people to help with companionship, and the avatars were voiced by real people. So we're going to continue, I think, to see this combination of technology that connects us and isolates us, and sometimes blurs the lines between whether it's technology at all. So this avatar, for example, I mean, obviously it's technology, but it's voiced by a real person, almost as if you're having a phone call. So there's this human technology connection, this crossover between them that is really fascinating, and I think will continue to happen. The third big shift that I've been watching is what I call the modern believability crisis. And this one's maybe a little more personal for me because I created a lot of content, so media, but I've spent my entire life working in the field of marketing. And for a long time, this believability crisis was really fueled by marketing because we'd see ads for things that didn't make us feel good about ourselves, right? We'd see these images of beauty and fashion that are meant to make us feel a little bit worse because now we have to go out and buy new things. This was a real ad from Levi's that said, hotness comes in all shapes and sizes. And then it showed you 4 women that are basically the same size. So what are you supposed to think after seeing something like that? What you see is that you're not good enough, that you need to get better. We also saw unbelievable claims. So these are some breakfast cereals, and this is big here in the US, all these breakfast cereals that boost your immunity, or they're all natural. How can these products be all natural? Like, they don't grow on a tree. It doesn't make any sense, but these claims are allowed to be used, and they're misleading. And so people see that and they lose faith a little bit more in what they're seeing or what they're being told. Now, aside from the marketing, there's also an effect of the media, because we see these unbelievable stories. And every day we're seeing news stories and we don't know exactly what to believe. Are the death tolls correct? Are the infection cases true? Are these treatments that are coming up, are they valid? Are they scientifically proven? Are they not? We can't trust our leaders because they're just making up stuff to make themselves look better. And so we just lose that faith a little bit more in the media and in information as well. And these are just a few of the books that have come out recently that have all been talking about that same principle, that same idea that, look, we don't know what to believe. We don't know what to trust. And so we're just going to be skeptical. That's our solution. We're just going to be skeptical of everything because we have to be. We don't have a choice otherwise. So the real question then becomes like, well, how do we choose? Like, how do we know what to pay attention to? What are the tools that we can use to be able to do that? What doesn't work is getting on the phone and scrolling for 2 hours and just trying to read all the time, trying to read everything. Because even with the tools that are available to us, I mean, here's a tool that allows you to be a speed reader, right? That's what the tool is for. And so it flashes up words faster and faster so that you can read super fast. And I don't know if you're trying to read this, but like, it's not a good experience. It's you're probably going to get a headache, and you've only been looking at it maybe now for 15, 20 seconds. Imagine if you did this for longer than that, right? It would be really, really tough. And the real truth is, you can't get smarter by trying to consume everything. It doesn't work. That's not the right way to do it, because A, you can't consume everything, and B, you're going to make yourself sick. I mean, one of the things we have here in America that I think hopefully has not translated to other countries is speed eating competitions. This is a very American thing where you have people competing to eat as much as they possibly can in a minute. And it's disgusting. But if you think about going to something like this and trying to compete and being super hungry and then trying to eat everything, like, you wouldn't be hungry afterwards, but you definitely wouldn't feel good. And that's what sometimes happens when we try and consume all of this information. And if you see your consumption of information as your information diet, which some people kind of describe it as, then we're creating this situation where we're making ourselves sick from this information that we're consuming. And the problem is social media is making it even worse, because it serves up those stories of the things that you probably already agree with. And so you end up reading the same thing from the same people over and over again, and you become more informed and more narrow-minded at the same time, which was never really possible in the past. I mean, the more you read, the smarter you would get, generally, in the past. But now, the more you read, the dumber you can get, because you're just reading the same thing over and over again, and you're not seeing the entire perspective. So part of our big challenge is to be what Isaac Asimov once called a speed understander and not a speed reader. How do you become a speed understander to pay attention to more, to see more in the world, and not be stuck just reading the same things over and over again? That's been a big question for me. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do that. And one of the ways is by incorporating 5 specific habits into your day. 5 methods to train yourself to be what I call a non-obvious thinker. Somebody who isn't narrow-minded, somebody who doesn't just pay attention to small points of view, but actually sees the world a little bit broader, sees more perspective, looks outside of what they usually get, and is just a better, more informed person. So how do we do that? Well, I want to share with you what these 5 principles are, these 5 habits. And once again, as a reminder, at the end, I'll give you the URL where you can download all of these slides. You can join the list and get the slides sent to you. So you'll be able to have access to all of them. So just in case you want to kind of take notes, but you're not able to write that fast, or you just want to have the slides afterwards, I'm happy to share them with you. The URL will be up at the end, or it's you can go to it right after the talk. It's nonobvious.com/global foresight. So nonobvious.com/global foresight. Easy, get all of the materials there. But the 5 habits, the specific 5 habits, number 1 is be observant. Pay attention to details. Notice things. The second one is be curious, ask questions, engage your curiosity. Don't be afraid to dig deeper to find out why is something happening. Be fickle, move on. Being fickle to me means save an idea, move on to the next thing. Don't get stuck on that same idea for a long, long time. Be thoughtful. Think about things before you share them. Think about whether something makes sense. When a number is coming out or a stat is being put out, think logically about, like, does that make sense, that stat that's coming out? Is it meaningful, right? I can't tell you how many surveys I read where their conclusion, their definitive conclusion that they share with the world is 51% of people say something. Well, that's basically 50-50, right? If you think about it. But when it's presented that way, you're like, oh, wow, 51%, that sounds like a lot. But is it? If the other 50% think the other thing? No. But if 51% of people think one thing and then everything else is like 1% each, then yeah, it is a lot, right? So seek the context for the numbers. Don't just believe them right from the beginning. And some of this is like, are things that you probably know, but they're hard to practice on a daily basis because we see so much of this manipulation and we're not exactly sure what to pay attention to. And we're not exactly sure what's true. And the last one is be elegant. Choose your words very deliberately. And I love words. I love books. I pay a lot of attention to them. I mean, look, I'm here in my home office, and if you take kind of another look off the side, these are all the books that I have here. So I read a lot of books, and that's a big part of how I choose to express ideas and how I choose to read. But a lot of them are unusual choices. So these are a couple of the books that I have chosen to read over the last maybe year and a half. They're unusual topics. But in addition to those, I read much more current books. And I'm very lucky because I run through our company, the Non-Obvious Company, we run a Non-Obvious Book Awards program. And so every year, we select the top nonfiction business books that were most engaging, that were most interesting, that were most non-obvious in our team's opinion. And we issue awards for those. So if you're interested in getting a new reading list, if it's a moment in time when maybe you have a little more time to read, you can see what all of those recommendations are and what the winners were. Just go to nonobvious.com/book awards. So nonobvious.com/book awards. And you'll see the winners of the book awards for the last 4 years that we've been doing it. Every year there's a new version. But the nice thing about that also is I get sent a lot of books to look at. And so I'm lucky because I don't have to buy all of them, first of all. But second of all, I get to read them and engage with them. And when I do, this is how I read them. So what you're looking at here is a picture of these colored tabs that I'm using. And the whole reason for this methodology, the reason why I do all of this is because I want to save these interesting ideas for later consumption. I want to use them at a later point. And when I do this with the books, I can take any of the books off of that bookshelf I just showed you that I read a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and I can still see what I found interesting, which is really valuable for me because now I can go back to them and I'm creating an archive of ideas. The second big thing I do, one of my favorite habits to do, is I read unusual magazines. And as you'll see later with a photo that I'll show you, my favorite magazine is actually Monocle magazine because it gives you this global perspective of all of these things that are happening in all of these different places. But I love the variety of these magazines, mainly because I can do something that I can't do anywhere else with anything else in my life, which is I can pick something up and very quickly get a perspective from someone who is not like me, someone who doesn't like the same things I like, someone who sees the world entirely differently than I do, and I can open my mind because of that. So when I pick up a book about, when I pick up a magazine called Modern Farmer, I'm not a modern farmer. I don't know anything about farming. But when I pick that magazine up, I can understand something about what farmers would care about. When I pick up a magazine about knives, for people who love knives, I can learn something new about that. And the opportunities for us as people to do that are very rare, if you think about it, in the media ecosystem right now. Because how do we consume media right now? Everything's algorithmic online. So every site saves the cookies, they learn what you like, and then they serve you more of what you like. And what you never end up seeing is that other point of view. A lot of people, everybody listening here, you're probably pretty intelligent when it comes to the internet. You're probably pretty web savvy, so you probably already know this. But you would be amazed how many people think when I Google something and when you Google something, no matter where we are in the world, we get the same results. No matter who we are, we get the same results. And that's not the case. What you see on Google is based on what Google thinks you want to see, and it's different than what I see. Now, some things are the same, but it varies because the algorithms are coming in. And again, those are very hard to escape online. But if you go and pick up a physical magazine, now you can escape that, because that physical magazine wasn't written for you. It was written for a large group of people, and you're just one of them. And so it allows you to break out from that. So when I take all of this information, when I take the books, when I take the notes, when I go to events, back when we were able as speakers to travel to events, I would go to 50 events a year and speak, and I would listen to amazing speakers at those events also and interview them. And I'd take all of this information and I'd put it together in this way. And this is what it looked like for me every year as I did this process of curating all of the research. So to me, this entire process, what you're looking at here, is my way of bringing those non-obvious habits to life and using them to do what I call trend curation. A lot of people use the term trend spotting. I don't think that exists. I don't think trend spotting is a thing. I think idea spotting is a thing, and I think it's hugely valuable because you're looking for great ideas. Putting them together in a trend is sort of the same thing as taking flour, eggs, and sugar and turning it into a cake. It doesn't just show up as a cake on your shelf if you take the ingredients and stick them there. You have to do something in order to turn it into a cake. And just like that, I believe you have to do something with these ideas to turn them into a trend insight. And so this is what my process looks like. But I want to take you very quickly inside what it looks like in a more real way. And so I put together a time-lapse video. And what you see in this time-lapse video is the progression of how I start to put these pieces together. So you were looking at some still images before, but essentially this is that whole process live in action. So what you're seeing is a collection of different ideas, curating those ideas together, putting the pieces together so that it makes sense, trying to elevate the ideas to come up with something bigger, come up with something more tangible, then naming that trend. And so in this case, it's named truthing, which is a trend for figuring out what to believe based on what you already know. That trend then turns into a trend that turns into a chapter in the book. And what you're looking at there is one of the trends. And every year for the past 10 years, there's been a new trend. There's been 15 new trends that have come into each version of the book. So this is the trend list for just 2018 and 2019. And what you'll see here is a progression of all of those trends. So over the last 10 years, there's been a new version of this book every year. And 2 months ago, as I said, I released Non-Obvious Megatrends, which was the latest and final edition of this series. So the series has been going for 10 years. Non-Obvious Megatrends is the last version of it. And so the question you might be wondering is, well, why is it the last? Why have you been doing it for 10 years and now you're stopping? It wasn't because of the pandemic. I decided 2 years ago that this was going to be the last one, and it came out in January. And the biggest reason was because it's been this 10-year project in my life, and it's a lot of work. And I thought 10 years of doing this was a good amount of time to see what those patterns were and to put those pieces together. And so in non-obvious megatrends, this last version, what you'll see is not only these 10 big megatrend predictions, which are laid out in the book, but they each encompass trends from previous trend reports. So the whole progression you can see in there, along with a very detailed appendix that has every past trend predicted for the last 10 years, so more than 100 trends, along with letter grades against each one of them for how they performed over time based on conversations and workshops and work with corporate clients that I've done around these trends later on. So there's a lot of transparency behind it. And I wanted to make this a capstone of that whole project. So that was one reason why I decided to stop doing this annual trend report. The other reason was because I'm taking the non-obvious brand and making it into something much bigger, as you see on the bottom row here with all of these guides. And I'll talk about the guides in just a second. But one of the things we did, and I teamed up with Microsoft to do an exploration of this whole process, and they did an article about it. And as part of the article, they had a team of photographers, and they came and they wanted to do a pretty entertaining photo shoot. And I mentioned the shoot before, but I want to show you what probably the best photo that came out of that photo shoot was. And it's this one of me wearing Post-it notes. And this was not Photoshop. So we did this, and I actually stood there and had all these put on me. And you will see, if you go to my Instagram feed, my Instagram name is Rohit BB. You can see a time-lapse video. You have to scroll down a ways because it was a while ago. But you'll see a time-lapse video of us putting all of these Post-it notes on. But the reason we did it was to demonstrate that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of noise. But if we can be intentional about it, if we can be intentional about seeing what the patterns are, then we can start to get better, we can start to get smarter, and we can actually put those pieces together to see what the trends are and what to pay attention to. So with our remaining couple of minutes, I want to take you through the trends. And I promised 4 trends, but actually I'm going to up it. I'm going to add a bonus trend. So an unexpected 5th trend. And what I did here is I brought out 5 megatrends from the book, which again came out 2 months ago. And I tried to bring in some modern examples and evidence to show that that's continuing to take off over time, that that's continuing to matter. And I think the first thing that I want to just give a shared perspective on is that is what that definition of that trend is. So for me, a trend, and this is my definition of the trend, is a unique, curated observation of the accelerating present. And the most important part of this, I think, to me at least, is the accelerating present, because it really speaks to this idea that I'm trying to focus as in the futurist work that I do, I try and focus on what's happening right now and put together patterns for why it may accelerate into the future. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what could or might happen. Instead, I spend most of my time observing what is happening and then predicting that more people will start paying attention to it. So more companies will pay attention to it, more products will come because of it, but consumer behavior will change as a result of it. That's really the space that I like to stay in, because there's people who I think are really smart at projecting far forwards. And some of them I know are speaking on as part of this summit, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. My perspective is more as a consumer behavior expert who really pays attention to how people act, why they make the choices they make, and what implications that has for business and for marketing. That's really what I try and focus on. So let's talk about the trends. And the first one I want to share with you is the human mode. And the human mode is this sense that the more technology we had, the more important the human interaction, either physical or now virtual, has become for us. So there's ways that this is being brought to life. And before the virus, I would talk about the relaxed checkout line at the grocery store, where anyone who needed a bit of extra time, people with dementia, they could speak to someone and take a little extra time. And now that's transformed into these early hours for seniors and people at grocery stores and people who are vulnerable as well. Right? So it's just this another element of humanity. Another thing that's just become big and gone hugely viral is John Krasinski, the star of the old TV show The Office, and he's kind of an actor that's done a bunch of different things. Started a news network on YouTube called Some Good News, and that's gone hugely viral because people kind of want a little good news right now. Like that's what they're looking for, and that's what they're hoping for. There's musicians of all kinds that are doing these live jams. Here's Bare Naked Ladies, a Canadian band that is doing a live jam where you can listen to their music and just kind of feel like you're in the living room with them, even though we're all isolated. There was another amazing effort from a Broadway music star who reached out to high school students who had had their musicals canceled because of the coronavirus and said, look, you did all these rehearsals and you really worked hard for these songs. I'll be your audience. I'll go on social media and I'll listen to your performance. And it was hugely meaningful for a lot of those kids because they had worked really hard and they weren't going to get a chance to do their production. And so they could do it online and share it online. So what all of these point to, and what you'll see with each one of these megatrends that I want to try and leave you with, is an actionable insight. So in this case, and I call them stealable ideas. And in this case, the stealable idea is how do we make this idea of made with empathy a big part of our strategy? Instead of saying it's made in whatever country it's made, let's say that it's made with empathy and look at what that actually means and try and deliver on that, because that's what we all are seeking a little bit more of right now, a little more empathy. Next trend is something I call instant knowledge. And instant knowledge is a megatrend that describes how knowledge seeking had been shifting for some time and now has just dramatically accelerated because all of our kids are at home, they're all doing distance learning, they're all figuring out how to learn things in a virtual environment because they're forced to do it. And so there were some interesting examples of this already in the past. And there was one of an 8-year-old boy who decided that he wanted to go to McDonald's, and so he went on YouTube and taught himself how to drive. 8 years old, crazy. My 8-year-old could not reach the pedals, so obviously this was a tall 8-year-old, but really scary, right? If you're a parent, that this is the level of knowledge that anybody can get any moment. Just go on YouTube and you can figure it out. Tasty cooking videos. We all may not necessarily have been used to cooking every day, but now many people are, or at least they're cooking more often than they had to. So these videos that teach you how to make something just by showing you the ingredients in a very quick time lapse and saying, mix this, this much, there's your recipe, done. Much easier than a recipe book. And already, even before the crisis, they were reaching 500 million views a month. That's, I mean, an insane number of views. And now it's escalating even further. Now, lots of different platforms have also started offering knowledge and learning access to their platforms and access to their tools for free. And there's amazing tools out there as well that all allow you to try and engage this. And I promised I would also come back to the non-obvious guides, the guide series. And really the intent behind this guide series, and I wrote a whole article about it, is I believe, we no longer live in a world where dummies guides or idiots guides are what people want. People don't see themselves as dummies or idiots anymore. And those guides were created in the 90s for a different mentality. And the mentality now is, I can go online, I can figure it out. And the guides haven't kept up. And so this guide series that we've started brings together deep expertise, really amazing authors who can write about a very specific topic. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a link where you can get the next guide that I've been working on with contributions from over 50 different experts that's coming out very soon, which is the non-obvious guide to virtual meetings and remote work, which is totally relevant for, I think, most of us right now. And I'll share a link with you on how to get that guide for free as soon as it comes out very shortly. But the stealable idea here is, how do we change what we do or what we provide to help people get smarter faster? Because that's what we're all expecting and looking for. And how do we do it in a way that doesn't translate instant knowledge for the perception that that's the same thing as wisdom, right? Because if we just spend an hour watching a YouTube video, that doesn't make us an expert. And it shouldn't allow us to claim that we're an expert or believe that we're an expert. So we still need expertise. We still need wisdom. But the access to instant knowledge is very transformational for those things that we need to do on a daily basis. And we want to try and enable that and allow people to have access to good stuff, good insights from all of the smart people that are speaking here at an event like this, as well as all of you listening, who have great insights to share as well. All right, next big mega trend, revivalism. Revivalism is the sense that because of the believability crisis I spoke about earlier, and us not knowing what to believe, we sometimes turn the clock backwards to the past, to the things that we used to know, to the analog experiences that we remember because they feel more trustworthy. So we're listening to music on vinyl again. Kodak released film for diehard photographers who wanted to go back to shooting on film. All of these old entertainment properties are coming back and making a resurgence. Picard. I used to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation a long time ago, and I'm so excited that this Picard show is back, and it's great. I'm in the middle of watching it, so no spoilers. I'm in the midst of it right now. But all of these things are coming back. People are playing analog experiences again, like board games, classic video games. They're rediscovering the analog. And this is before we were maybe forced to do that a little more by having to stay home and having to have those experiences together. So already that was starting to happen, and now it's going to accelerate. It's going to continue because we are looking backwards, and we have a lot of, most of us, I think, have a lot of nostalgia for what we used to do, right? We're thinking back to, remember when we used to go out to the field and just play a game of pickup soccer? Like, wasn't that nice? And we'll get back to those things, but right now we're in this nostalgia moment where we really feel the loss of these things that are not, obviously it's not life or death whether I can go out and play a game of pickup soccer, right? But I miss it. And it's okay to miss it because that's human. And if we can help people to reconnect with those things and to sort of make that easier, then we should do that. And that's what's happening, I think, right now. Next big megatrend, purposeful profit. Purpose was already growing as a big, important piece of why people stay loyal to certain brands, both as consumers, but also as employees. Who do you choose to work for? You choose to work for the company who believes in what you believe, because that's who you remain loyal to. And if you don't have that, you might keep somebody for a while, but then they'll move on to something else. They'll want to do something different. So how do we integrate this purpose? And we're seeing that in a very fast evolution right now through lots of different things, right? So beer companies are making hand sanitizer and putting that out there because that's valuable. There's a restaurant brand out of Seattle called AdAge that was doing these boxed meals and also providing meals for homeless people or people who needed food. Patagonia for a long time has said, don't buy that new jacket, buy the old one, get it fixed, keep wearing these things, recycle them, reuse them. Like, that's what we want. We don't want this stuff to just go into a landfill and be fast fashion. So how do we, as people and as organizations, and if we're in a consulting role, our clients, how do we help them to stand for something bigger, to have purpose in this time when that's what we're looking for from every company, from every leader? We're looking for people who have purpose. And the last trend I want to share is something I call flux commerce. And flux commerce really has two elements. The first is that the business models behind many businesses are shifting. The way that they make money is changing. And the flip side of it is that the lines between industries, what used to be two different industries, has now become a single industry. And people are starting to blur those lines in between various things. So you look at Apple, technology company, getting into banking and finance. Lots of banks were opening coffee shops. This was a trend kind of globally with ING and Capital One and lots of different banks. There was this fascinating theater in Barcelona that ran a promotion, and this was several years ago. They ran a pay per laugh campaign where they put iPad screens on the back of the seats, watched facial reactions, and then charged people based on how frequently they laughed. And then a couple of years later, they launched Pay Per Love, where they looked at what people laughed at and matched them, single people, with someone else who laughed at the same things, because if you have the same sense of humor, maybe you'll get along and you can make a love connection. These are all totally different business models. In this case, a business model for how to pay for a theater seat through laughing. People are starting to innovate around that, and they have been innovating around that for a while. But now with the coronavirus, there's entirely different concerns for different categories, right? So when the roads are empty and people are driving less, what happens to automotive insurance, for example? Several automotive insurers, at least here in America, have proactively said, look, we're going to start giving some money back because we're collecting all these premiums. No one's driving. People aren't crashing the way they usually do. So nobody's claiming against the insurance premiums. So we have all of this money. And before it turns into a PR problem for us, we better start proactively giving stuff back. And the really smart insurers are the ones who did that first. The ones who haven't done it are starting to look really bad, and probably over a very short period of time, will start doing that as well. Another example of the lines blurring was Taco Bell opening up a hotel. This was a short-term thing, so they don't have it still, but they're promoting the brand through something like the hotels. And I already talked about the ghost kitchens from before, and Crayola shifting from making crayons and markers to doing makeup, because makeup is basically painting your face, right? It makes sense. It's a brand extension. That's what we call it in the marketing industry. So the idea behind all of these is, how do you disrupt your business? How do you disrupt how you work at a time when you have been disrupted? You've had to disrupt. And I believe that the groups that will be able to manage that are the ones that will be the most flexible to move from what they were doing to what they now might do. And one of the places where I'm finding a lot of hope from that is in this idea that for years and years and years, as somebody who would share innovative ideas and be in a consulting capacity, one of my biggest frustrations was that I would go to these big companies and I would come up with or share with them these innovative ideas for what they should do, and they would agree that that's what they should do, but they would be risk averse and unwilling to do it because what they were doing was already working. And now we're in a moment where I don't think any of these companies can afford to be complacent, to sit on what they're already doing. And so I'm hoping, and I'm actually already seeing signs of this, that there's more appetite to be more innovative. And overall, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for all of us, I think. So ultimately, what it comes down to, and now bring back up this quote from Isaac Asimov, is that I believe we are in a moment right now where we all need to try and be speed understanders instead of speed readers. And a speed understander is someone who doesn't try and scroll through every story for 2 hours, but who figures out how to pay attention to the right things, how to broaden their perspective and read more magazines that are unusual or not targeted at them, find different news sources, talk to unusual, different people who don't think the same way you do, go to summits like this one with many different varied perspectives to try and get a different point of view, and make yourself smarter. One of the ways that I do that to help people is by publishing a weekly email. So every Thursday, I share the most interesting stories of the week. And in order to find those stories, I spend hours and hours going through hundreds of different possible stories, and I select the ones that are most interesting, and then I offer a quick take on why they're interesting. So if that's valuable for you, or if you, like I said, if you want to get all of the slides from this presentation, or if you'd like a copy of this book that you're looking at here, which is the Non-Obvious Guide to Virtual Meetings and Remote Work, which is coming out in just a couple weeks, all of that comes from joining this email list. So go to this URL, join the list, and you will get access to all of those things. And finally, I'm going to open it up to questions here. Before I do, I'll leave you with one last photo from that photo shoot and my personal email address. So you're welcome to email me directly if you want to ask me any questions or anything like that that we don't get to. That would be amazing. And I would love that. So thank you for joining. Thank you for being here as part of this. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. And I hope this presentation helped you to be on the path to thinking in more non-obvious ways, and that helps you in this time of craziness and disruption. So let me switch over now to questions, and I see some questions here. So I think we can go through some of these. So let me see. I see one here from Marguerite. As an anthropologist, I'm fascinated by what makes us human. On a foundational human level, are there megatrends that you have seen that seem to be timeless or universal? Yes, in a nutshell. And I think that the human mode megatrend is certainly one that fits that category, Marguerite. I think that our desire for that connection wasn't always physical. I mean, we saw even before this whole virus hit that a lot of people were feeling connected even though they weren't physically getting together. And I know as a parent of a teenager, it is frustrating for me sometimes because I see my son bonding with his friends even though they're not physically together because they're doing things virtually. And I don't entirely understand it because I didn't grow up in that same culture that he has. But I know that just because I don't understand it doesn't mean they're not bonding or connecting on a human level. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm seeing as a macro trend. I think there's also kind of a macro shift right now where a lot of people are saying, oh, now that everybody's worked from home, like they all know how awesome it is, so everybody's going to want to work from home. I don't think that's true. I think that there are a large number of people who are now forced to work from home that are saying, oh, I cannot wait to get back to the office. But they probably won't want to go back to the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And that I think is going to be the biggest change, that people will say, you know, I could work remotely 1 day a week. And on that 1 day per week, when I'm working remotely, that's the day when I don't do any meetings because I'm going to do real work. I'm going to actually get my work done. And so what happens to a lot of people in the workplace, in the office, and I used to go to the office every day. I don't anymore because I have my home office. But what will happen to a lot of people, I think, is they'll say, you know, when I go to the office, I'll have the meetings and I'll have the collaboration. But when I'm working from home, like I'll do the actual work that I need quiet and solitude and isolation to do. And they'll find the best of both worlds. And I think that'll happen much more often. And the companies those people work for will be much more willing to allow them to do that, which was part of the challenge, that people wanted to do it, but the companies said, sorry, you can't. All right, let's see. I see another question here from Martine. You're promoting non-obvious thinkers. Great. But how can we ensure we are embraced and not feared or ignored by the normal thinkers? Some organizations seem to attract and retain like-minded people instead of others that tend to try and disturb the business as usual. Yeah, I've seen that for sure. So I agree with that. There's a couple of methods that have worked for me. The biggest one that has worked for me is whenever I'm trying to sell something that's really innovative, that seems like it's risky, I always try and make sure to show the cost of not doing it, the cost of doing nothing. Because I think sometimes what is easier for someone to say is, well, that seems interesting, but it seems risky and it's safer to just not do it. And if that is what they think, you have to change that perspective. You have to demonstrate to them that actually there's a risk in not doing it. And the risk is someone else comes and starts to take your market share. Maybe that's the risk. The risk is on a personal level, maybe someone who's more innovative comes in and gets promoted ahead of you because you're not willing to do the next thing. Like, we have to show that there's some cost to not doing the innovation. There's some cost to business as usual. Because if there's no cost to it, and if it's just all upside, you know, any reasonable person would say, well, yeah, everything's going great. Like, why would I change? So we have to be able to show that cost. That's probably the biggest thing.